Everything is ready. Okay. For the presentation.
This button goes to the next slide. If you hit this button, goes to the previous one.
Okay, brilliant. I think a few meters from here. I think we should start. Good morning, everyone. It's an incredible pleasure to welcome you to our event this morning. And we just want to thank the NDC partnership for enabling us to use this venue for our event this morning, Financing Climate Resilient Food Systems for Achieving NDCs and NAP Targets, Options for Implementing the Commonwealth Living Lands Charter. Many of you might not know what the Living Lands Charter is all about. And so we just want to share a short video on the Living Lands Charter as we start this meeting. So I'll ask the IT team to start the video. Thank you. As you can see, we are the Commonwealth, conglomeration of 56 member states spread across all the continents of the world. And we're very delighted to bring together our Commonwealth member countries as well as a wonderful panel that will speak to us today about financing climate resilient food systems. This is a part of the work that we're doing on the Living Lands Charter, which, as you saw there, has 5 key themes that we're looking at. And we've got livestock, we've got agriculture, and which really form the basics and the foundations of our food systems in many of these countries. We believe as we deliver on these different key thematic areas, it will deliver sustainable development for our countries and a climate resilient future for not just this present generations, but future generations. We're already behind time, so I will at this point ask Motsumi, who is a very dear friend and works in the UNFCCC Adaptation Division, to come and speak to us on food systems integration into NAPs and NDCs. Motsumi, welcome.
Thanks very much, Kalisi, and good morning, everybody. My apology for being late. We're still running lots of things. I had to make some corrections to the text just before I started my journey here. So anyway, I'm very glad to talk on this topic because most of the time during the year when we are not busy with the negotiations, we do lots of interesting work with Kalisi and many other colleagues. And in the UNFCCC, we actually launched an alliance together with a lot of members in the UN system and wide on climate resilient food systems. This was in recognition of the fact that food and climate, or actually if you look at the climate actions by the countries, whether you look at them from their NDCs, you look at them from their national adaptation plans, food is always number one. So if we truly want to address the climate problem, food is one of the primary areas that we need to be looking at. And through the Food System Summit that was led by the UN Secretary General in 2021, there was then the alliance that was born, and as the UNFCCC Secretariat, we saw it befitting for us to lead that work from that time on. And also, if you look not only in the NDCs or in the NAPs, from the planning side of things, but also when it comes to implementation, if you look at the portfolio of projects from the Green Climate Fund, from the Global Environment Facility, and I want to believe as well this would be the case even domestically and otherwise, food still features as one of the primary areas. And there are a lot of countries that are doing lots of flagship activities. So for us, in terms of speaking on how of the integration of food into the NDCs and NAPs, I simply wanted us to reflect or start at the end in terms of what we want to achieve, which is basically what we want to achieve and what we are embodying through the Alliance is to achieve climate resilient food production, food supply chains, distribution, consumption, etc. So the whole food systems, we want to achieve a climate resilience in the food systems. And that means that we will ensure sustainable food, access to food for all, and especially to those that are disadvantaged their positions to do that. But then which brings us to how we achieve that, because that's an outcome, that's a goal that we want to see. But how do we achieve that? And we can only achieve that if we truly implement ambitious adaptation actions to build the resilience of our food systems, to help both from the smallholder farmers, but also systematically in the entire mega economy of the countries, looking at the food production as a whole, looking at the food systems as a whole, and seeing how we build resilience towards that. And then they have to be implemented at the right scale. That means, of course, at all levels that are appropriate, and at the right time, because the climate risks, as we have evidenced through the recent studies that we continue to receive every now and then, is that climate change continues to cripple many other productivity areas, including in food production. So how do we make sure that we implement the actions at the right time, at the right pace, at the right places, and taking a longer term perspective as well? Because food is one of the interesting things. It's just term in the demand because we need to eat now, but we will continue to eat forever. So it's a long term as well. So we will continue to eat. Also the other things that we are trying to look at as well in terms of how we can do this best, food is connected to many other things. Food connects to water, food connects to energy, food connects to livelihoods, food connects to the economy. Most of our economies and livelihoods in many of the developing countries are driven by agri-food systems. So how do we pursue integrative approaches that ensure that as we adapt the food systems, we also take mind of all the systems that are connected to it, from crops, from livestock, from fisheries, but also everything else that connects to the whole of that chain to make it productive. And also, how do we incrementally carry on regenerative food practices that return more to the environment than the way we take from the environment? How do we incrementally implement those practices to make sure that we maintain our ecosystem health while we continue to produce and take food from it? And also, how do we continue to ensure that we focus on the most vulnerable, those that really need the help, our smallholder farmers, fisherfolk and men? How do we make sure that we continue to focus on those, and broadly so in the least developed countries, of course, small island developing states and many landlocked developing countries as well? At the UNFCCC, there are two things maybe I would wish to highlight that we do, or at least several in terms of adaptation. The national adaptation plans, as you would know, that countries are working on now, and in fact in the negotiations, many of you that follow adaptation, you will know that is one of the big subjects. Countries, we are encouraging them to take what we would call the integrative approaches that I was talking about. Adaptation links to sustainable development. It leads to also national and subnational development, but also to other global frameworks. DRR, or for example, is a very close one that it links to. And I'm very happy that today we just launching the framework on the Living Lands Charter, and congratulations to the Commonwealth on this flagship charter, because also under the UNFCCC, one of the foundational things that is true is that land as a resource, I think, is the fundamental element on how we build and provide for the entirety of the ecosystems. So we do encourage countries, and we have models that we have created now that help countries in terms of how do you connect the different pieces together. You look at the food from a more systems approach rather than looking at food as a singular issue. So we look at the systems. So if you're looking at crop production, who are the stakeholders to involve, what are the risks that are, what are the other influencing factors, who should be in the table, and how it connects to the overall national economic development. And then once you start to put that and make a big broader picture, then it helps to ensure that countries can integrate food and put it at the right place, both in their national adaptation plans, in the NDCs, but also in the framing on how they want to achieve long-term resilience. As I did indicate, we also launched the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance. Within the alliance, what we are currently doing now, in recognition of the linkages between climate and food, we are working with countries whereby we are taking the agriculture strategies that exist at the national level, whether it's the food systems pathway, the national and sectoral plans on food, as well as now the climate-related strategies, so the NDC or the NAP, where it exists, and whatever else. We look at these policies and look at how we can build synergies, where are the leverage points, where we can maximize this synergy and these connections between climate and food. And then work with the governments and identify what are the measures that we can do to accelerate these connections and the transition towards building climate food systems resiliency. And within that, we've just started with a few countries. We've done that with 8 countries, and I'm very glad I'm seeing that my own home country, Lesotho, they are here, and we've been working with them as well, with the support of members in the alliance, to see how we can do that. And the next phase now will be to carry forward those observations with the advice of the countries that this is what we see as the activities or the entry points where we can get support to accelerate transition towards climate food resiliency, and see how we can start to implement those. They range from measures where countries want to bring together the stakeholders and start to create these linkages, to measures where countries want to deepen the assessments and the thinking, to make sure that the assessments are no longer only applying the climate lens, but also apply the broader comprehensive risk management concept in terms of how we carry out the actions, but also in terms of the implementation. What are the actions that would drive better impact towards economic development? Because at the end of the day, we want to sustain livelihoods, we want to sustain the economies. So what are those activities? So we'll be working with countries in the coming years to make sure that we can drive towards that entry point. And of course, indeed, looking ahead, what we are looking at is also trying to incrementally help towards that integrative approaches, as I was mentioning, and also multi-stakeholder engagement. And one of the things that we do in the Alliance, which is big, I didn't talk much about the Alliance, but we can talk about it at another time. We bring together all the UN food agencies, and we bring together all the climate-related agencies. But at the same time, we also bring all other actors and players. So the convening element there is very strong as a very start. And when we take that model and we apply it in the service to the countries, then that's the strength that we're also creating. And we're also using that model to also translate it into how we help countries at the national level to then strengthen that sense of coordination, to make sure that the food, the agriculture and the climate people are together. And of course, there is also an issue of implementation where we see the value in creating large programs. Our colleagues from the big funds as well. I know that the colleagues from the Global Environment Facility and other colleagues are also preparing programs that will look at food security at a more holistic at the regional level. So this is what we're looking forward to doing in the coming years, and very happy to be part of this event, and thank you very much. And once again, apology for coming a little bit late.
Thank you very much. At this point, I want to invite several countries from the Commonwealth to give us a country perspective. If we could have Lesotho, Vanuatu, and Fiji and Nauru, if you representations to please come forward. And first to give a presentation is Lefulesele Lebesa, who is from Lesotho. And Lebesa, do you want to come up front here and give a perspective of what's happening in Lesotho, and for the benefit of the participants and the discussants? Over to you.
Thank you very much for this invitation for Lesotho to also come and present how we see the food systems and how it's being affected by climate change, and what are the efforts that we are doing as a country. I think I'll just start with a brief background just to show maybe the vulnerability of Lesotho. It's one of the small states, landlocked, and it has a mountainous rugged terrain, and it has the higher elevation, with the lowest being at around 1.4. That is already telling us some of the challenges that we are likely to face. And we have the soils that are ranging from shallow to deep fertile soils. But unfortunately, most of the shallow ones are covering the lowlands, which are the ones now that are more for the crop production. Contribution, of course, of the agriculture is approximately about 7, although it has a potential, given that if all factors were addressed. So we do suffer extremely from the droughts, the strong winds, and the heavy rains, which eventually leads to soil erosion. But also the hours are enough for the crop production, or they favor crop production. We have the crop and livestock is usually mixed farming, and predominantly we have smallholder farmers whose farms are around 1 hectare on average. And this relies mainly on rain-fed, which is also another challenge that is making agriculture susceptible. As we can see in the livestock, we do have the large and the small stock, and both are mostly grass-fed, which often or mostly plays strain on our rangelands and leading or contributing more to the soil erosion. These are generally the key challenges that I can highlight. We do have the fragmented and limited policy and regulatory framework, which needs to be mainstreamed very well to address the climate change issues, or combine them in such a way that they talk to each other. One of our challenges also is the land tenure system, whereby there's really no full ownership, and as a result, the land doesn't really belong to people, and that leading to limitation when it comes to finance and the stable farming land. We have the climate change and disaster risks, the land degradation, the pest incidences and rainfalls, like I have already said, which usually lead now to soil erosion and eventually low production and productivity. Post-harvest losses, this is the area that we really need a bit of strengthening. The value chain and infrastructure challenges. We do not really have the good value chain and infrastructure challenges, and as a result, for example, the horticulture sector, it suffers a lot because pertaining to the infrastructure, collection points, storage, and all that becomes a challenge, and now it links back to the post-harvest losses. One other area that still needs is the limited information. Not that it's limited, but maybe how to project it so that the knowledge is shared amongst all the stakeholders, particularly the most vulnerable ones. These are just some of the adaptation efforts, but I'll mostly talk about the efforts that we are doing. For example, we have the project where that is called ECOF, where we are looking at the vulnerable communities, strengthening their knowledge and passing the messages that are climate-related and timely, and also dealing with the media to make sure that the messages that are passed by the media is actually the same message that is passed by the meteorological services, and also linking that to the extension or the agricultural services, so that when such messages are passed, also there's a timely action or the appropriate timely action. And so far it has worked very well with the farmers because the farmers have been capacitated and the extension services also has been capacitated. We have, we have the one that is working on the land management, is called ROL, which is dealing basically with making sure that the land management is done so that the natural resources are available, also as a good basis for the agriculture. We do have several others, like the smallholder agricultural development, which is basically dealing with the making sure, giving grants to the farmers, especially for the protected agriculture, the irrigated infrastructure, and also supporting specifically the nutrition activities by introducing the nutrition clubs so that the rural areas understand, and because Lesotho is also one of the countries that are suffering a lot of malnutrition, particularly the stunting. Then we have other projects or activities such as those undertaken by the research department under the project called APSA, Agricultural Productivity Program, where the major emphasis is about development of the technologies and making them accessible to the farmers, as well as how they adopt those. But the most important thing is, how do we do this? Now we have what you call the integrated catchment management, which is where all services are done together. We are making sure that the environment is taken care of, so we are basically dealing with the water and the energy and food systems together. That makes us to make sure that everything falls under. So this is just a list of what we are saying, if a way forward that can help to make sure that we are answering to the NDCs and the NAPs. And as we are in the process, like it has been mentioned, of developing our NAPs now, so we have to take into consideration the stakeholders that are involved and make sure that we come up with the activities that are encompassing. I think that is all I can say.
Thank you very much. I'll invite Malcolm. I'll ask our speakers to just take their 3 minutes. I'll set an alarm, so you will hear an alarm after your 3 minutes is done.
think my presentation is not coming up, but I can just speak. Yeah. I mean that's good. Then I'll be probably under 3 minutes. Oh, here we go. Yeah, for Vanuatu, especially when you talk about the food systems, it's responsible for roughly 19% of the country's GDP, and it's equivalent to just over $100 million, taking into account 2020 figures. Subsistence agriculture is basically the majority of the food production system that occurs, and we have 15% as far as semi-commercial production is concerned, and 10% where commercial activities, which mostly occurs around the urban areas. Women particularly play a critical role as far as crop production and fishing is concerned, where subsistence and semi-commercial activities are concerned. The recent agricultural census shows that just over 55% of our households and institutions are engaged in the production of crops. And as far as the climate change and food systems interlinkages or the nexus is concerned, agriculture for Vanuatu makes up over 70% of our total greenhouse gas emissions, but in terms of global emissions, it's very much negligible. I'll just like to highlight two initiatives. We have the Vanuatu Coastal Adaptation Project, which was supported by UNDP, and this is a GEF-funded project with the initiative to improve resilience of communities, particularly with village-level interventions. This particular project initiative commenced in 2015 and 2019. By the end of that, we had a number of achievements in terms of the creation of new protected areas, at least 8 within the coastal areas and 2 upline protected areas. Early warning systems as well, which is very critical to help the smallholder farmers and those engaged in food productions to take preparatory measures. And for Vanuatu, I'll come to the challenges later on in terms of our risk profile, but preparation is very important. The added infrastructures, we heard about this. Oh, 1 minute. Okay, so I'll go to our challenges in terms of multi-risk exposure, as well as the unsustainable land use practices. And then there's the funding gaps or delays in disbursement, which we very much want to see an improvement in terms of efficient delivery. Our transformation potential, especially looking at the NDC pathway, we currently have agriculture as conditional targets within our enhanced NDC, and there's been an assessment which we think it might also go into when we have our NAPs being developed and rolled out, having to improve the policy coherence to address health and climate change, and as well as including or having measures and targets to incentivize conservation practices as far as agriculture, forestry, and marine ecosystems is concerned. The last point with climate, particularly financing, is looking at all this array or palette of funding sources, and particularly unlocking private sector financing is concerned, but to focus on capacity building, disaster risk management, and bottlenecks, especially to include private sector actors. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Commonwealth for giving us the opportunity to be present here and talking on a topic which is of significance, importance to Fiji, which is on climate resilient food systems. Probably just to begin off, to set the scene, let me provide you some background on the agriculture population in Fiji. So as you can see in the graph, the farming population basically comprised of about 71,000 agricultural households, which is mainly male-headed. So around 88% of it is male-headed and only 12% is female-headed. In terms of farmers, there are about 84,000 farmers, of which male is comprising of around 85% and female is 15%. In terms of farmland information, we have around 195,000 hectares of farmland, which is out of which only about 68,000 is owned by farming households. On a more macroeconomic level, so agriculture contributes to around 689.3 million, which accounts for around 8.2% of our national GDP. In terms of food production, around 327,000 tons of food is produced for local consumption, of which 121.3 million is exported. So this graph basically shows the government's plans in the next 5 years. So our focus has been more in terms of diversifying our agriculture sector in terms of commercial agriculture ventures, ensuring village nutritional security, providing long-term food security, securing urban household food security, establishment of nest reservoirs, as well as securing more markets for our agricultural produces. The next slide basically talks about the current strategies that are in place in terms of agricultural resilience. So in Fiji, creating climate resilience food systems is very imperative due to the impacts of climate change that we have in terms of rising sea levels. We have extreme weather events as well as change in rainfall patterns. So it becomes very important for the government to actually prioritize this sector. And there are a lot of strategies that are already in place. For instance, in terms of diversification of crops. So we are trying to encourage the cultivation of a wider variety of crops and moving away from the traditional staples like cassava and aloe. So we're trying to move towards crops that are more climate resilient. Yeah, and the second one is on traditional knowledge integration, so whereby we are trying to recognize and incorporate traditional knowledge and traditional agricultural practices that have been in the system for all these years, and which have proven to be more climate resilient. So techniques like agroforestry and crop rotation. Yes, so the next one is on water management. So we are working on implementing water conservation techniques, improving our irrigation systems, as well as rainwater harvesting to ensure that we have adequate supply of water in terms of droughts and other, climate change related challenges. In terms of policy support, so there are a number of initiatives and policies that have been developed to support sustainable agriculture and provide incentives for more climate resilient practices and facilitate access to more markets for small farm holders. In terms of technology adoption, we're trying to promote the use of more climate smart technologies such as weather forecasting tools, drought resistant seeds, and precision farming methods to optimize our agricultural practices. Community-based adaptation, this is mainly, we're trying to engage our local communities in developing and implementing climate resilient farming techniques which are tailored to specific needs for our environmental conditions. The next slide basically talks about the challenges that we are currently facing in terms of our initiatives that are there. So in terms of challenges, we have limited access to markets and resources. We have infrastructure constraints in general, and there is a need for greater financial support and technical assistance to actually scale up the initiatives that are already in place. So very briefly, some of the challenges are more in terms of climate change impacts, such as the extreme weather events are having effect on our soil, so soil degradation, issues like threats to our livestock, and crop failures. In addition, one of our major challenges has been the access to resource markets. So while the initiatives are introduced to improve market access, there's still issues around logistics and infrastructural limitations, which actually hinders the farmers' ability to reach the market and get better prices for their crops. Another issue is sustainable practices. So creating that balance between sustainable farming methods and traditional methods has been a challenge. In addition to this, we have food security and nutritional issues, because the focus of the government has been to, improve nutritional values. Nutritional food security in, especially in rural communities. So that has also been a challenge. And I think the potential for transformation lies in further integrating sustainable agricultural practices, leveraging the use of technology for smarter farming initiatives, and as well as developing policies around, developing policies that actually enables the smallholder farmers to grow. So I think all in all, there is need for more collaboration between governments, NGOs, as well as the local communities in terms of building a climate resilient system in Fiji. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Syed, your 3 minutes begins now.
So still waiting for my presentation. So I'll talk about the narrow food system. I'll talk about briefly about the introduction and background challenges and potential opportunity for transformation. This is a very small country, 21 kilometer, and not more than 13,000 of people. And food security is a concern for this country, because 100% is the food is imported from the Australia and the New Zealand. So it's a little growth because of the 90% area is the barren because of the climate change issue and the phosphate mining. But they have not felt till the COVID-19, and then the borders are closed, and then they felt that there is a need to grow their own food because it is a problem for them. At the same time, the high rate of non-communicable diseases and the low life expectancy is also associated with the imported food. So the food security and the nutrition is very important, and life and death for this particular country. This is a small country, you can see, and due to the harsh climate change, the food is on the business as usual condition in the field level is difficult to grow. So challenges, the climate change variability and the climate change make the narrow efforts to achieve the sustainable more challenging as compared to the other countries. Sea level rise is increasing salt inclusion into the ground resources, so it even making more worst condition to grow the food on the normal field conditions. Changes in the rainfall pattern, sometimes we are having the drought and sometimes we have a floods, lack of arable land that could create additional challenges in the food security and food production systems. Degraded land reduce resilience of the ecosystem with a poor water quality due to the poor infiltration and erosion. So from this you get to know that under the normal situation it is difficult to grow the food. So no activity or agriculture or otherwise can be undertaken without the consent of the landowners. That is another issue. And there are fragmentation of the lands, then changes into the agriculture more visible, viable and valuable despite its overall social and economical importance, and agriculture is associated with the poverty rather than contribute to the household income and nutrition. So it is a big challenge. So in conclusion, in the field level, it is difficult to grow and we need to do some other things. So potential opportunity for totally 360 transformation, and it can be possible to the climate smart agriculture system. So that can be happened. It's a few glimpses for that due to the shortage of time. But we are preparing a project that include each and every aspect of climate smart agriculture, starting with the climate smart vegetable tunnel system for fresh vegetables which will available around the year. for this particular country. Establishment of a climate-smart design form of poultry, pigs, and fishery that meet the local meat requirements for 13,000 people. State-of-the-art drip and sprinkler irrigation system to grow vegetable around the years that will support to the tunnel forming. And installation of renewable energies due to solar and biogas that will really support the energy requirement for this particular system. Establishment of a food value chain and cold storage system to ensure the food security for a longer period of time. So this should be like a system once we establish the project. So this can only happen when we have funding, technology, and capacity, and something with that we are doing from the JEFET, and still we are requiring more partners to join us to implement these innovative ideas. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you for your input, and I'll ask all of us just to give a hand to all these wonderful people for their inputs. That gives us a very, very good global as well as a country perspective. I'll invite, if you could take your seats, I will invite our next panel. And I think one of the key things that has been said across by all the speakers to date is the fact that there is need for collaboration. And so I want to invite the following panel. The first person I'm going to invite is Mr. Uni Krishnan Nai from the Commonwealth. And I also would like to invite Mire Atala from UNEP, and Claudia Ringler from IFPRI, and Jahan Zeb, who has just come in at the right time. So just want to invite them. Because of our time, I want to go straight into a discussion with these wonderful colleagues who are working on various aspects that have been highlighted as the countries have presented to us some of the challenges and the issues that they are facing as pertaining to their food systems. And I want to start with the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth, many of you might not be aware, has the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, and many of the countries that spoke this morning highlighted the issue of finance, access to finance. And we know that the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub is a delivery mechanism really meant to support countries to access finance. Could you indicate how that has been progressing, Mr. Nai, in terms of food systems, particularly support on food systems and access to finance from your perspective? And what needs to happen to expedite access to finance for countries in their work trying to address these issues?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a very important topic and an important area of work. So as Commonwealth, we have two mandates. One, the Commonwealth Living Lands Charter that delivers on the food systems, and the delivery mechanism under that is the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub that support member countries in moving the needle. So when you talk about food systems, we see the multiple aspects around food system, but we do see those are priorities in countries. So we look at the growing phase, the harvesting, the packaging, the processing, transportation, marketing, and of course the consumers. So in each step of the food system, we do have different financing requirements, and of course we've heard from Lesotho, from Vanuatu in terms of where lies the difficulties. Like if you look at the, for example, we've got a lot of requests coming from the post-harvest side of things actually, because we see there's a lot of losses happening. But at the same time, if you look at the investments that our banking system and our financial sector are putting onto the post-harvest side, is still in single-digit percentages. Actually, like if the investments on the on the growing side, on the production side, is around 30% or 40% of the GDP, then basically the investments of the GDP allocation for agriculture, the investments in post-harvest processing is around 1% or 2% or 3%. So obviously, that's one of the reasons why the losses are high, and so reducing loss is actually more incremental and better use of land, and also like efficiency in production. And so the project development space where we are in, we are focusing hugely on the post-harvest side of things, especially when we are now reviewing, because we are at a stage where we're building on many readiness projects, and also within NAP, even the implementation actions is happening around readiness. So we currently have successfully accessed 176 million US dollar worth of projects in the food system space, and we do have a pipeline of around 200 million that we are working with our member countries. So the focus largely is on the post-harvest side. At the same time, we also look at the policy side, because we heard a lot, and many countries are looking at diversification. For example, like we know the water intensity of crop like sugarcane. Like, so when we move from such a crop, or maybe the high dependence on wheat and rice in the Deccan. So if you move from such crop, whether the policies and enabling the market shift is a bigger thing. So the dependency of the federal governments on these food systems in these countries and provinces are very high. So moving away from a crop, and when we talk about crop diversification, we should have enabling policies as well as financing. So the Climate Finance Access Hub is also trying to work on these policy aspects that enable the financial systems to work in line with these required shifts. Then we also do have issues around gender and youth mainstreaming. So especially on the entrepreneurship space, like we do have a lot of startups coming in this space, coming with innovative ideas. But you know, like still we lack a lot of seed funding requirement, and that space is still not there. The bridge financing required to move into that space is still not there. So those value chains, sometimes like you get to see there are good ideas, but those are not taking off in this front. And last bit on the food and health systems. So we were discussing with IFPRI in terms of the Golden Rice initiative that we started off sometime back in India, where we tried to fortify the rice and bring the vitamin A content up in rice. But you know, the financing system was ready to take off, but the policy clearances and coherences were not happening. So some of these areas we definitely would like to see things moving up. And I was very keen to note Lesotho's legal framework on water, food, and land and energy. So I would like to discuss more on that to see how a legal framework would support probably integration of this. I think that's one of our major bottlenecks. But I think largely a system transformation space. You know, I don't think climate finance is a solution for the food systems. The current budgetary processes and development schemes that the countries are implemented, half of them don't have any climate mitigation or adaptation aspect integrated into it actually. So how, and definitely the interdepartmental coordination that comes into play there actually. So unless and until we have something that goes into these development schemes, and if you look at the countries like Nigeria, Malawi, the schemes are huge actually. So if you don't integrate these aspects on a landscape-based approach into such schemes, that's not going to work. And your diversification, your post-harvest processing, your low carbon input for packaging, so everything will come within that. So an initiative taken by one department is going to be counterproductive to the other department. That's what we have been seeing. Like the perfect example is the drinking water and the irrigation water. Like it's the left and right hand is not able to coordinate and act together. And I mean, it's a subject like we can speak for days together, but I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Uni. Mira, I want to come to you because you've also been involved as a member of the Climate Resilient Food Systems. I just wanted to get the views from UNEP. What do you think are the urgent priorities? And urgent priorities in this space from your perspective?
Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for this extremely important session, because also what we can see is that sometimes what is prioritized in NDCs can undo NAPs and adaptation priorities, but also if there isn't enough ambition in NDCs, then the implications are that food systems will change, ecological zones will change, climate analogs will shift, and so that needs to be accompanied by a significant shift in adaptation priorities and in adaptation planning. Some of the priorities that we see, number one is that across the board, with NAPs, agriculture is a top priority or always among top 3 priorities. That's because of the connection with food security, of course, and that also we saw a surge in this in the backdrop of COVID, particularly when countries that were heavily reliant on food imports saw their food security challenged. Number 2 is precisely the last point that you mentioned. We issued our State of Finance report yesterday. It shows that there are $200 billion that are going towards nature-based solutions, including resilient soils, resilient ecosystems, resilient water systems. Now, the key is that it also analyzes how much money is flowing towards nature-negative flows. That's 7 trillion. So the hand that is doing something for resilient ecosystems is a minuscule hand in comparison with the one that is actually undoing those. And among the 5 sectors that have received those financial flows and subsidies of the 7 trillion, undermining ecosystem resilience and resilience more generally, one of them is agriculture. So we really, really need to look at agriculture subsidies and their alignment and their alignment with resilient agriculture systems.
Brilliant points, Mira. Thank you so much. Just want to say, because I know we don't have time, so I'd like you to be very short and pointed. Claudia, there was mention of women in the presentation. If you could just address that. How do we design fit for purpose policies to enable gender mainstreaming and include youth in your answer if possible?
Gender-blind policies for NDCs and NAPs will reduce overall outcomes for countries and will certainly increase the gender gap in resources, agency, and achievements. And I have heard quite a bit on gender, but certainly not enough in all of those presentations from the countries. So as long as we don't have very gender-specific policies, institutions, and investments, we will further grow the gap. In food insecurity, women face higher food insecurity. And if we do invest in women, we have better nutrition, we have better health, and we have much more climate resilient nations. So any plans that you are doing, and especially in NDCs, because we talk about livestock mitigation, women have special roles on livestock. We have to work with women and make sure that they do not suffer in any of these mitigation action. Livestock is 53% of agriculture emissions. Land resources. We know that women are not on land titles. We know that even if we put women also on land titles, as long as they don't have the knowledge to understand what the land titles entail, they will not implement climate resilient action. We have evidence on that. We really have to work with women. We have to do much more capacity sharing. And post-harvest is another area. It's an area where women contribute a lot, where they can contribute a lot more, but a lot of the post-harvest interventions do not actually engage women to ask them what post-harvest solution works for them, reduces their time, makes sure that they're not replaced by a machine, that they actually run the machine, that they control the machine, they control the income from the machine. And I know we don't have time, but thanks so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's quite clear. The last question on this panel is to you, Jahan. Jahan, in your work in IFAD, if you could highlight any innovative financing mechanisms that countries could leverage on, and where possible, give us examples of that, particularly because you work on food and food systems and agriculture.
Yeah, I think I have 1 minute, so I'll try to be very short. I want to start with the smallholder farmers. If you think about climate finance flowing to the smallholder farmers, they're getting $5 billion US. That's $5 billion US going to 500 million smallholder farmers, producing 1/3 of your food, our food. We have spent $35 billion in McDonald's burgers last year. So imagine the difference. Second, if you want to increase the flow of financing, flow of volume, we have actually recently come up with a publication with NDC partnership where we have provided 4B framework, which essentially means we need to start thinking about benefit sharing from the very beginning. We need to build a pipeline. We need to bundle different sectors. Let's forget about silo approach, bring agriculture, water together. And if we do that, the actual ROI, return on investment, is going to be 5.14% more than if you're only focusing on a single sector. And the last one is blending. It's important for us to blend the public sector financing with private sector. I'll finish with an example of a project that we are doing in Africa. This has recently been approved by GCF, approximately $200 million US. We are bringing 45 million together with GCF, another 45 million, that's 90 million US, as first loss risk facility for a private sector bank, which means that the private sector bank is also bringing 90 million US, so it's 1:1 investment. But with that mitigation risk instrument that we have deployed, it's easier for us to bring that private sector in without any risk mitigation instrument. But of course, loan is important. This is all loan. It has to be blended with grant financing, because only through grant financing we can innovate, we can take risk, and we can scale up something that has been proven to be successful. So altogether, it's a $200 million investment, a project that we have just launched at COP28. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jahan. And just for your information, that publication is available in the NDC website, so if you can, do access that. I know we do not have much time, and we had wanted to have 1 or 2 questions. Is there someone with a very burning question? Just one. If not, I just want to ask you to applaud our panel and say thank you very much for your inputs. This is a conversation that I think we should continue after this, and we've had so much. And please pull someone that has said something that's interesting and you would like to continue the discussion after this. We're coming to the close of our event today, and we are so grateful to the NDC, and I want to invite Amanda to come forward on behalf of the NDC partnership to give us a wrap-up and closing remarks.
So thank you. I don't think I'll even try to summarize what was discussed today, but what I wanted to do is maybe just share a few thoughts on the way forward. And one of the, well, maybe 2 of the things coming out of this week. First is the discussions around the global stocktake and the need to do more. And I think conversations like this are so critical to identify not just what countries are doing and some of the best practices, but how we can actually use that to scale up those successes and raise the ambition of NDCs over the next couple of years. The second thing that I wanted to mention, and this is building really off of the second panel, is on the need for finance to actually bring this forward. And this is something that we hear all the time from countries, especially following the last NDC update round, that we have NDCs, we need to implement them, we need the finance to do that. And so as we look at the next round of update, we're looking at the implementation and the financing in parallel. So not treating these as separate processes, but thinking from the beginning, these are the actions that we want to do, this is how we're going to do it, this is how we're going to finance it, so that we're not leaving those questions till the end. And just to reiterate that the NDC partnership, our members are here available to support this, and we look forward to working further with the Commonwealth over the next few years to make this happen. So thank you very much again to all of our panelists, to everyone for joining us, and I wish you a good rest of the day.